So Leinster through to the semi-finals of the Heineken Champions Cup after a 12-point win away to the Exeter Chiefs at Sandy Park. Johne Murphy was watching this game for us on OTB SPORTS, and Johnny, an absolutely brilliant victory for Leinster after what had been a disastrous start.
Yeah, it was. For them to come back the way they did after the first 11 minutes of the game, and then control the tempo. They quickened it up when they wanted to. They played out of their 22 in the second half of the first half. They played out of their 22 rather than looking to kick. And then you look at how they control the tempo the last 25 minutes. I thought it was a great display. They've obviously had plenty to work on in terms of their defensive sets early on in both halves. But for me, it was a really, really good victory.
What was it that was happening at the start of both the first half and the second half? Because they conceded 3 tries in the first 8 minutes of the first half and then the first 2 minutes of the second half. The bulk of the points Exeter scored throughout the match were pretty much all in those first few minutes of either half. So what were Leinster doing that was so slow at the start of that, and how did they kind of recharge things and put it behind them and get back in front?
For me, defensively, they seem to be defending in 1s and 2s, not knowing who was on their outside, not knowing who was on their inside, and then not being able to react to what the inside man does, particularly for the first try. And then the second try, they isolate a front row forward by O'Loughlin getting ahead of the ball and creating that hole for I think Henry Slade to go into. So they just have to shore up their connections in that. It was the same in the second half when O'Flaherty went through. He was picking off 1v1s where they had 3 guys in a connection in a line to go forward, and they just weren't. Whatever it was, whether they weren't talking or there just wasn't enough awareness. So it's something that they showed for the majority of the game, particularly in the second half, for a good 20 minutes when Exeter were attacking. Their connections were good. They were dominant in their tackle. You look at what Maloney and Baird brought off the bench. Really good. Good line speed and repeated efforts. So it's not like they can't do it for whatever reason. It was just that people were just a bit outside of, just weren't clued in those starting periods of each half.
And what does it say about them then, that the fact that they did endure those really difficult periods at the start of both halves and they were able to put it behind them? And as we said, by the time the 30-minute mark arrived, they were level with Exeter. They were about to go in front. Within 10 minutes of the start of the second half, they'd conceded that try, nearly went back behind, and they'd extended their lead further again. So, is that the mark of an absolute top-class team?
Yeah, I think it shows massive mental strength to be able to come back from that, but more importantly, probably unwavering belief in what they had planned to do throughout the week. You saw a couple of really good first phase attacks from them that give them the opportunity low, particularly in the first half, to get that 1v1 v Woodburn, get his hands free and get that offload. So very much a belief driven team that knew if they did what they had practiced and what they had planned to do, that the score would very much land on their side. And I think that's, for me, the biggest thing from this, that in such a high pressured game against, which could be arguably a semi-final or final in this competition in normal years, they just held strong. When they did get the ball, they controlled it. After that 11-minute period, and they were clinical. They were very, very good.
What it did mean, the fact that Leinster conceded a couple of early tries, is that we ended up getting a game or a first half at least, that we absolutely were not expecting. We were speaking off air before the game started, and we were talking about how we were going to get a top class game, but it was going to be really tense. It was going to be down to really tiny little moments throughout the course of the whole match, and in the end, those 2 early tries that meant we had an incredibly open first half with some brilliant running rugby, ball going out wide on so many occasions. It made, I suppose, most of that game really, really enjoyable from a neutral point of view.
Yeah, massively. When you go down early like that, you have to play. You have to have the want to play, and also, as I've already said, you have to have the belief in what you're trying to do, and knowing that you're going to be accurate, particularly in that. They attacked out of their 22 on multiple occasions rather than trying to look for field position. It was a great game. There was one period where, and I think that was a real momentum shift and probably a belief killer for Exeter in the sense that the ball didn't go out. It was in play for probably 4.5, nearly 5 minutes, and that phase of play was won by Leinster. In the second half, it was probably more of what we thought it was going to be, particularly the last 20 minutes, where Leinster slowed the speed down. That didn't suit Exeter. They had a lot of reset scrums. They got a scrum penalty obviously towards the end, and that very much shows, you know, you control the tempo of a game, you're going to win it. You look at what happened when Leinster have probably been knocked over by Saracens or other teams in the past. They haven't controlled the tempo or executed at the right time. You know, Saracens, before they went to the corner, probably the wrong decision. Those opportunities today, what the decisions they made were clear, they were concise, and they were clinical at the right times.
And they had to overcome a couple of challenges during the game as well. Like, we didn't have half an hour gone by the time that Ross Byrne had to be called for Johnny Sexton to go off with a HIA and didn't reappear. They were already missing James Ryan, they were missing Gary Ringrose, and a whole host of back row players, including Caelan Doris. Like, this isn't a Leinster team that are absolutely locked and loaded with their first choice. Ross Byrne had to come on, and he had a very, very good impact, kicking, I think it was 4 out of 5 in the end.
Yeah, look, Ross Byrne for me is someone that probably isn't getting the credit that he deserves. He plays a lot of rugby, particularly when Johnny Sexton is away, and you know, he's a very, very good player. Probably this Six Nations, I felt he probably could have got probably a bit more opportunity, particularly at the start. And you know, he's showing that now. The more he's grown into his role, when Johnny Sexton has been away, he's now in the Irish camp and in that mix all the time now. He's now throwing his hat in the ring for selection on these big days because he's backing it up when he gets the opportunity. You know, you look at the squad that they have, the squad that they've developed. You know, people would probably have felt that the weak link might have been Rory O'Loughlin in that back line. And they probably targeted him in the first 11 minutes, and they got that connection probably just between him and Lowe. They got a bit of change, but from then on he was excellent. Put in a lot of double efforts, some really good shots. Unfortunate not to get that breakaway try towards the end. And you look at what, you know, Maloney, Ryan Baird, what they bring off the bench. They have probably one of the best squads in Europe, I think, and a lot of it is homegrown. So, well, the majority of it is homegrown, and it's you know, it's a pleasure to watch when it comes off like that. But yeah, they're, you know, I think when these guys come back into the reckoning, that's when you're going to see Leinster at their best.
And someone who's had a season disrupted by a lengthy enough injury, and then was in Irish camp and didn't get to see too much game time. Jordan Larmour, 2 absolutely outstanding tries for him, tries that had to really be finished. They weren't just handed to him on a plate. He had to do some serious finishing in those corners.
Yeah, I think so. You know, the first one for me, you know, Keenan's timing of the pass is pretty much perfect there. Just tags Hogg's inside shoulder just at the right time and then releases the ball, and then the awareness from Larmour to get in, get low and ground the ball before he goes into touch. For me, the second one was an exceptional finish. He catches the ball, he's standing, that acceleration off his left foot to get outside Hogg, who is himself incredibly sharp, and then break a tackle, but then have the awareness to really rip his shoulders in the tackle from Simmons to get down and ground the ball just before the line. You're not going to see very many finishes like that this season. It was top quality.
And one other player worth mentioning then as well, he was the official man of the match today, Robbie Henshaw. Like, he is just going from strength to strength this season. He was absolutely awesome again today. What has he done in the last 6-7 months that has just actually brought his game to another level?
I think he's probably just concentrating on what he's really good at. He's leading the line defensively. He's very physical, abrasive player, and then he's showing those touches of quality, you know, in his passing game and his kicking game. But for me, it's just his work rate is exceptional. It's his double, triple efforts. You saw today he picks Woodburn up at one stage, gets down, gets over the ball. This is in the first half when they really need something to happen. He drives past, gets the turnover, and that gives Leinster the opportunity to go into the corner. And I think they get a try from that. It's those kind of unseen things, for the want of a better word, that really show his genuine work rate. But his defensive effort is it's world class at the moment, how he took Simmons out of the game on multiple occasions, particularly off short line outs. He got a man and ball, gave him no opportunity to get any go forward whatsoever. He was exceptional again today.
And the important then, we're down to the semi-finals. Leinster and La Rochelle are already there. On Sunday, it's going to be Bordeaux Begley against Racing 92 and Clermont hosting Toulouse. Obviously, a lot of it is going to come down to the luck of the draw with who gets paired in a home semi-final, because we've seen how big home advantage is. But where are Leinster ranking, do you think, in what's left in this competition?
Right up there for me, particularly if they can get some of those injuries back. Hopefully Johnny Sexton comes through after his knock today. For me, they're right up there. Probably La Rochelle are probably the unknown quantity in there so far. But you look at Clermont, Racing, they've been there before. They've been close, but for me, I think they're right in the mix. And I back them to go pretty close.
I know, obviously, as we said as well, like there's 2 matches still to play tomorrow. Off the top of my head, like La Rochelle, Leinster, Toulouse, and Racing 92. It's tough to pick 2 bad semi-finals out of that 4 potential teams. If Toulouse and Racing were to win tomorrow, I think regardless of what happens, what's coming up over the next couple of months with the semi-finals and finals, we're going to have some absolute belters.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, probably a lot of Irish people are hoping for. Depending on what way you work it, probably the Munster supporters are hoping that Rog can do a favour and pull one over on Leinster, maybe in a semi-final or final. But from an Irish perspective, I'd love to see that in a final. See Rog going up against Leinster. It'd be amazing, and he's building something special there. They probably are the outsiders of the group at the moment, but what he's building. They're the unknown quantity of it, as I said already. So, it's a proper competition. I suppose the luxury of what has happened in this year is that we've seen so many really good ties early on. From last week, Munster and Toulouse. We're used to seeing that on quarterfinal or semi-finals day. Today could have been a semi-final or final, and it's given us some proper rugby. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be exciting to watch.
And just finally, on the mention of Ronan O Gara then as well, obviously he's going great guns with La Rochelle. They hammered Sale this afternoon. A lot of talk over the last week or so when we've seen how well La Rochelle are playing, that people want Ronan O Gara to be back in Ireland at the earliest possible opportunity. What would your own thoughts be on that? Would you want to see him be brought back into an Irish setup at some point soon, or is he better off to stay out of the bubble for as long as he can?
That's for Rog to decide, I suppose. I watch a lot of him on off the ball, obviously, and I just think, his interview last week, BT, just shows kind of what an unbelievable coach he is. Coaching ultimately comes down to probably man management and understanding your players and getting the best out of them. He's doing a great job at that. His career path is, he's Irish. He probably wants to come home. He's got a family, an opportunity to get him in the Irish system. You'd be mad not to take it. What I mean by that is you'd be mad not for Ireland not to go after him. Why not? We've seen what the likes of someone like Paul O'Connell has brought to an Irish setup. What would someone like Rog bring to any Irish province? I know I'm probably going to get a lot of abuse from Munster supporters for saying any province, but I think he'd be a massive asset in Irish rugby, and hopefully it's not too long before we see that.
Any province. Johnny, we'll leave it on that absolute cliffhanger for today.
Yeah, well look, I have to throw something out there.
Johne Murphy, thanks a million for joining us today.